Good morning. Welcome back to the morning briefing. It's Thursday, August 11th, and this is episode 192, getting closer and closer to episode 200. Hey, I'm Phil Brandt and back in the office after a great week at Missouri SHRM conference, which I'll give you some feedback on some observations I had during that time. With me, as always, is your friend and mine, legal expert, Burt Garland, shareholder with Ogletree Deacons. Good morning, Burt. How are you doing?
Good morning, Phil. I'm doing well. I'm glad to see you made it back safely from the Ozarks, and you guys, you survived the deluge down there, and were able to clear the rain out of St. Louis as well. It's been rather nice the last couple of days, and hopefully people are, to the extent anybody experienced any flooding in their homes or anything like that, hopefully people are recovering from that.
It has been quite a storm to weather. I know here locally, if anyone is listening from outside the region, we have just had outrageous flooding, just unprecedented amounts of rain. And yes, our hearts and prayers go out to those people who have been affected by that. I know together, Burt and I, go ahead, Burt.
Yeah, that's all right. It amazed me. I was out at a client the other day driving over into St. Charles and over the Page Avenue extension and looked down off the bridge at the Missouri River, and just astounded me how low the river is in light of all that rain. So I guess when it comes down to the north of us, it fills up down here, and when it comes down in our area, maybe it fills up down the river. But was shocked after all that rain we had to see how low that river was.
Yeah, once we get past the immediate local flooding, it's really the downriver effect, right? I mean, even in 93, when we had, the great flood in 93, most of that was due to rainstorms other places, not necessarily locally. But at least we're not having Missouri River flooding here on top of what we've experienced. So yep. That is good. I cross the river every day, and that's always a gauge for me, is looking at the river levels. I don't know, maybe it's a sign of age. It's something my father used to talk about. Right now I'm doing it. So let's get off that topic, because that just makes me feel older. All right. So, Burt, I went to the Missouri SHRM, and we got a great question lined up that I think really, for me, it's a perfect timing for this question. There were some takeaways from that conference that I just want to share with the audience, because it gets to the heart and soul of what we talk about quite a bit on the program. But before I ask the question, I want to share this chart, and I'll describe it a little bit, because something I learned at the conference was, a number of people, I can't, just more than I can count, come up and said, I love your program. I listened to it. Seems that we have had a lot of listeners move to our podcast listening versus live listening, but a number of listeners came up and said, I listen on my way to work, and I don't have the opportunity to comment on the polls. But they liked the polls, they liked hearing the results. But if I had one person tell me that, I bet I had 10 people tell me that at the conference. So I'm going to keep that in mind as we share some information here. But Nick, what I want to do is I want to share a chart from, I guess it's the United Nations Department of Economic Social Affairs. And people who know me know that I'm always a big proponent of asking why, as a why man, not a whiner, but a why man. Because I think if we ask why and we get into, what's causing the problem, we have a better chance of solutioning it at the root of the matter. And I'm not sure we've been able to answer the question of why has it been so hard to attract talent. And the theme that I walked away with is, people are looking for that secret sauce. They're looking for, what's the 1-2 punch? I can put this thing to bed, solve my problems, and I can go back to how it's always been in years past as it relates to recruiting. And for years, we've been talking about the challenges of recruiting and talent wars, and it's only going to get worse. And I want to share this chart because I think this chart answers the question why, and then it sets up for us to prepare how to be better in the future. So Nick, if you can bring the chart up, it's a great chart to see. And again, this chart is from the United Nations Department of Economic Social Affairs. And the intent of this chart is to show the forecast under any scenario in which they run it. And I ran it under many scenarios with people having multiple children and immigration and other things that are all taking effect in America. And you can see we've started this decline in our working age population. So when we look at the decline in the working age population, and keep in mind the baby boomers are leaving, depending on what you read, somewhere between 11 and 13,000 every single day, the workforce, you see a scenario here where even in the most positive work environment or population environment, we are in severe different times, just a severe trouble when it comes to having the number of people available to work. And I don't know what turns this around. So when people are at a conference or they're talking with me and we have these conversations all the time, they'll say, well, you know, what is it? What do I need to raise wages to? What do we need to do for benefits? And I think the answer that we get to is it isn't a one approach solution. It's like it's my grandma's secret Italian sauce recipe. There's all these things that are going to go into it to make it all work, right? We're going to have compensation that goes into that. We got to have benefits that are going to play a part in that. We're going to need to have, strategies to attract talent. We're going to have engagement that leads to retention. And I think there's going to have to be engineering solutions as well. And what I mean by engineering solutions is, where do we have people where robots and other forms of technology can displace people, not so that we lose jobs, but so we can keep our facilities running. And we're seeing examples of that. I think I shared one the other day when I was at, Bandana's Barbecue, and my server was a robot right here on Manchester Road in St. Louis. My server was a robot, and it brought the food out, brought the drinks out. And when there was big meals being served, they would put the tray on the server, and one person would go out, and instead of two people having to carry trays of food and deliver the food. And I think it's going to be solutions like that that allow us to keep our businesses open, because when you look at that chart, it just is on a significant working population decline. And even in our best case scenario, it would be our worst nightmare. So
let me just interrupt you for a second, because as I'm looking at this chart, and I see that it appears that in the 1960s through the 70s, the workforce ages 15 to 64 was kind of getting close to that 60% number. And I do want to stress one thing about this chart is that this is extremely zoomed in. That the chart runs from 66% to 54%, which is obviously a pretty large range, but that's 12% of 100%, that range that's shown on this chart. So, let's try to keep it in perspective a little bit, that the numbers apparently aren't going to get to where they are in the 60s until the year 2040, 2050 area. I think we're wise to pay attention to the chart, but certainly there's a good portion of our population that's still around and will be for the next 20, 30 years to fill the jobs that are out there. I definitely think this is something that bears paying attention to, but through innovation and technology, I'm confident business will rise to the challenge and meet these meet the demands of consumers.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I do think the solution comes in all those forms. And that's why I say I think it's a secret recipe, and I include engineering, technology solutions in that. But I think it's also important to know that it's not going to get easier than today. It's going to become more difficult than it is today. If you said, well, we're going to maintain our status quo for all of our strategies of compensation, benefits, culture, engineering, that business is going to lose ground. There's no way to maintain ground because wages in this case are going to have to be balanced at some point to help solve the inflationary problems. but the movement of people or the need for people, there just isn't going to be enough. And 12% is huge. Think about what 1%, 2% does to our unemployment population and to our hiring opportunities. And when we see that declining by 12% in some scenarios or even more in other cases, it can be a lot. And I think that impact is going to be felt. And I'm not sure that we're done feeling the impact of that until we can catch up with it on technology solutions. It's not intended to be a scare tactic. It's intended to say, this is the root cause, in my opinion, and how do we now position ourselves with our business? And every business will have a different solution, but how do we position ourselves with a solution, understanding the population trend?
Yeah, and I'm curious, I did not read this, the study behind this at all, Phil, but I'm also curious why the United Nations is predicting the percentage of the population ages 15 to 64 by the year 2090 to go down from where it looks like we are right now in the, close to 65% down to about 57%.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why they're predicting such a large decrease in that age group of the U.S. population. It's that to me in and of itself is scary.
Yeah, it is scary, and some of the content behind it talks about the number of children expected to be born by the current generation. Let's call them the millennials and Generation Z. And I think they have looked at previous population countries like Japan and such have already gone through cycles like this for their predictions of population growth, immigration, and so on. So it's just going to be interesting. We need to keep our eye on it. It's not doom and gloom, but it's a reason why. And when we understand that, then we can move ourselves forward. All right, so let's get to that poll question. So the poll question, I think it's a great question for that. How confident are you that your business has a plan that will result in improved recruiting, improved retention, and engagement within the next year? Right? And so we give you a variety of answers there. We appreciate some feedback on that. When I was talking to people were confident they had a plan, and they're like, well, we're going to do a pay increase. I'm like, okay, good. What else are you doing? They're like, well, we adjusted our pay. We expect that's going to help us bring in people at an entry level. And I think that's what I mean by it's not a single approach solution. It's going to have a secret sauce. So I'm asking you after this, what's your secret sauce? Anyhow, here we go, Burt. Let's get on to some other things. In general, that was the summary of the conference, everything talked around it. And we also, in queue for that, before we even went, we have what is called the first annual AIM Wayfinder HR Summit. And that is scheduled for Friday morning, August 26th. We already have just about 140 organizations attending that summit. It's going to be offered live in person or virtual online. If you choose to attend live in person, it's going to be at the factory down in Chesterfield Valley. If you choose to join online, we will make those accommodations for you as well. We'll be simulcasted from our friends producing the program today at Feature Group. Nick will be there, and he'll be doing all the technical work to simulcast the program. We have 4 national keynote speakers talking about just these things that all come together to make the secret sauce. It's one morning of learning, and we invite you to join us. It's a very, very good price of $49, and we'll have some pancakes in the morning from Chris Cakes as well. If you haven't had those, they're a lot of fun. Nick, I see that our friend not Tom Cruise is joining the program this morning. Is it possible to bring him in for a quick hello to the audience?
Hey, it's not Tom Cruise, but I'm the next best thing. I'm the greatest movie star in existence, the most talented F-14 fighter pilot in aviation history, the most beloved bartender of all time, and the most caring sports agent in the game. I've been trained to dismantle a bomb in the pitch black with nothing but a safety pin and a junior mint. And if the government trusts me, maybe you should too. Now, this looks like a target-rich environment for a very important message. It's a code-red message, one for the Rock of Ages. And thankfully for your sake, it's not classified. I feel the need to inform you that AIM, a PBSA accredited background service provider, is your one-stop shop for all your HR needs. Great balls of fire! Woo! Now, my eyes aren't wide shut to the fact that you need help with HR. Just help us, help you, help us, help you, help us, help you. Now, you want the truth? I think you can handle it, and you're entitled to it. AIM is your Top Gun HR solution. They are the best of the best, legends with all the right moves since 1898. This ain't their first rodeo, and they weren't born on the 4th of July. You want to become a maverick in HR, then you're going to want to become an AIM member today, not someday at the edge of tomorrow. Now, someday, that's a dangerous word. It's really just a code for never. Now, are you with AIM or without AIM? With AIM or without AIM? With AIM or without AIM? Now, if you don't sign up for AIM today, I'll be very upset, and you've never seen me very upset. It's risky business not to let AIM keep you compliant. Now, AIM will take your breath away with all the solutions they have to offer. AIM is your control tower with 24/7 HR hotline always on standby to answer any of your HR-related questions. Now, this message will self-destruct in 5 seconds, so make sure you contact AIM to become a member. Don't think, just do. We are in this together. Fates intertwined, cosmic coincidence. There is no substitute. You can be my wingman anytime. Turn and burn.
All right, that's our friend, not Tom Cruise, joining the program this morning. Just a little bit of fun. It was a lot of fun making that little video there, and Nick was behind the scenes again at Feature Group with that, and we appreciate it. But a great message to our listeners who joined the program who are not members of AIM or clients of Ogletree. We invite you to be a part of the dynamic duo here, and let us help you. Let us help you. However, Tom Cruise might say that. All right, Burt, let's get on to Manchin and Schumer and the deal that was passed in Senate. We've been talking about that for a couple of weeks, and I'd like to spend a little time maybe peeling that onion back a little bit.
Yeah, so the bill was called, or is called, the Inflation Reduction Act. So interestingly, the Inflation Reduction Act appears to be the government's attempt, the federal government's attempt to try to combat the record inflation. I don't know if anybody had a chance to see our president speak yesterday, and he emphasized that in the last month we have seen 0% inflation in the last month. But what he neglected to mention was that means that there was no increase from about the 8.4%, 8.8% historic rate of inflation that we're seeing in the economy currently. What he means by 0% is that it didn't go up any more than the 8.4%. It's not like we're at 0% inflation.
You know,
So,
Bert, that's one
yeah.
thing I appreciate about our program. We just kind of tell you how it is. We're not
Yep.
trying to play a funny game here and twist words and numbers. We're giving you our opinion of what it is. And I mean, that's such a political angle, you know, to fool the American audience. It's just, I'm sorry, I have to just have my little soapbox there for a minute, but I can't stand that.
Well, politicians will be politicians, and we're all stuck being the victims of it. So, you know, this bill is a sort of a skinny down version of the $2 billion bill that the Biden administration had hoped to pass, that was known as the Build Back Better Act. And they did not have the support of Senators Manchin and Sinema for that larger bill. They were able to get Manchin and Sinema on board for this smaller bill, this Inflation Reduction Act bill, and through some bargaining and negotiations. And they did in fact vote for it, with Vice President Kamala Harris casting the 51st vote to pass the bill. Interestingly, there are a lot of things in this bill, as we would expect to see in any piece of federal legislation. There is about $300 billion that is going to be invested in energy and climate reform, tax credits for electric vehicles, and efficient home improvements. There is a lot on healthcare, in particular, negotiating drugs offered by Medicare. There's a 3-year extension on the healthcare subsidies in the Affordable Care Act. And then the pieces that are getting the most attention, there's a 15% minimum tax for corporations making $1 billion or more, and a 1% excise tax on stock buybacks. So those are sort of the highlights or the lowlights, depending on where you stand on the economy and your economic persuasion. I am a capitalist through and through, and so I personally don't think this bill is good for the economy or is going to do anything to reduce inflation, unless the idea behind the bill is that they want to slow down the economy, which is in fact one way to combat inflation, is if you have a contraction. So we've heard a lot about the R word, the recession word, being bandied about in the media lately, and there are a lot of folks who are speculating that this Inflation Reduction Act is going to contribute to a recession here. So this bill is I believe it's a $700 billion bill, piece of legislation, and it represents the largest federal response to push green energy that the nation has ever seen. It's the largest investment in green energy that we have ever seen. So again, that bill squeaked through the Senate just this past Sunday, provides hundreds of billions of dollars over the next decade for energy security and climate change programs. Most of the funding is designed to come from clean energy tax credits, and it's structured with tiers offering greater credit if certain labor practices are in place. So
any example of what you mean when you say certain labor practices are in place?
Yeah, so what they're trying to do is they are talking about providing investing tax credits that are tiered differently depending on whether prevailing wages are paid and apprenticeship requirements are met. Prevailing wages, of course, are determined by the U.S. Department of Labor, depending on occupation and geographic location. The apprenticeship requirements on many of the credits mandate that a certain percentage of the total hours of construction must be completed by apprentices, starting at 10% and scaling up over time to 15%.
It's got an undertone of labor, and I'm talking about big union labor in it. When you start using the words prevailing wages, apprentice programs, things like that, seems like it's right out of a labor handbook.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, and even for the production tax credits, green energy production facilities like wind, solar, and other energy producers that pay prevailing wages during construction, and for the first decade of operation, that pay prevailing wages during construction for the first decade of operation and fulfill the apprenticeship requirements, they can qualify up to 5 times the base amount of the credit for their types of work. The tiered structure is a bit more straightforward for the investing tax credit. A base tax credit of 6% can be unlocked for investments in the creation of clean energy facilities, again, such as solar, fuel cells, small wind property, and others. And the tax credit could actually increase to 30% if prevailing wages are paid during construction and for the first 5 years of energy creation if the apprenticeship mandates are met. So if you are in those sectors, you're going to have to pay very detailed attention to this to try to maximize the benefit for your industry. If you are in other industries, in particular manufacturing, you are not going to be able to take advantage really of any of this. And that was one of the biggest criticisms of the bill, is that it really punishes companies that are not in the clean energy sector, and also punishes companies and contractors whose workers are not unionized.
Yeah, no, it definitely seems to be weighted. You know, we've talked about some of the underlying intentions of some of these things. I know for a fact, Burt, that you're not against responsible use of energy. I mean, you yourself drive an electric vehicle. You practice, good practices, in and around your home and so on. So I know you're not against it when you have the position of, hey, I'm not sure I like this bill and the way that it's structured. I think you're really referring to, the politics behind the bill versus what the intent of the bill is to achieve.
Yeah, and you're exactly right, Phil. I mean, I think the big thing here is that it is a bill that had the full support of big labor, and that this is a payback, again, another payback by the administration to big labor, and will further increase big labor's chances to try to unionize employers. And I don't think that's good for competition. The other thing that I really don't like about this bill is that they're talking about proposing this 15% minimum corporate tax on corporations. And my feeling is that businesses, they don't have an extra 15% of profits just sitting around to hand over to the government. And so my hunch is that corporations that are going to be affected by this, it's going to hit them in the form of wages. They're going to have to pay for this somehow. So it's going to hit them in the form of wages, and also by passing costs on to the consumer.
Yeah, and we just talked about the need to be able to pay competitively, as part of, we'll just call it not secret sauce to make this thing work. It's not necessarily stacking the deck in favor for competitiveness. It's 15% helps pay for this initiative.
It does, and that's the idea behind it, is that the 15% will help pay for this bill. But again, like I said, companies aren't just sitting there with 15% of their profits sitting around ready to hand over to the government. And let me also give a little bit of a different perspective here, is that people ultimately, on the other side, the more capitalistic side, as opposed to the more socialist side of the argument, would say that the taxes are being paid when the companies pay that money out in the form of salaries and compensation, stock dividends, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. When they pay that money out to the people individually in the form of wages and stock dividends, et cetera, those people are paying taxes on that money. And so what the opposition really says is that this amounts to a double hit, a double tax. You're taxing the corporation's profits first. They're going to therefore have less to distribute, which is going to have a very negative effect on people's personal incomes, and from a wage standpoint, and from a stock option standpoint, dividend standpoint, et cetera.
Absolutely. All right, Nick, can you queue up the poll results? I'm trying to watch those as we go along. A lot of great comments from all of our friends who are contributing, and Martin and Ginger and Dave and Kim saying hello and thanks for the program. You're definitely welcome for that, Kim. Let's see what we have here, Nick. I'm going to try and look at it and give some results. So it looks like just over 50% are responding that they are, we'll just say, less than 40% confident in the overall plan. And I would say that's about right. There's a good percent of the group, maybe 25% that is 41 to 60% confident in their plan. As far as plans go, we know that they're outdated as soon as they're put to test. And then there's another, what we'll call 20% or so that's very confident, somewhere between 61 and 100% confident in their plan. For those that have submitted in that, I'd appreciate some comments in the chat feature as to what it is that brings you the confidence of your plan. That would be interesting for me to have some insight on, and maybe something I can lead some conversation on in the future.
Phil, I think what's really most interesting to me about these poll results is that we've got about 55% of the responses, so more than half, that are only up to 40% confident that they have a plan in place to improve recruiting. So,
Yeah.
so more than half are less than 40% confident, which I think says volumes about how unpredictable this economy and this political environment is right now.
Yeah, and I think that's, that's what gets down to the heart of most of the conversations I'm in with our members and some of your clients, which is what do we do? And there seems to be, there's early adopters, there's late adapters, and that's why I shared that chart, because I think it's the compelling reason to say, okay, let's just assume the chart is accurate in all the models that they run. What are we going to do as a business? That's the question. We got to sit around and solve that problem. That's exactly the challenge that Lane is having. I know Lane out in Indianapolis. Lane, I would suggest joining the HR summit that's coming up at the end of August virtually for you since you're in Indy, and listening to some of the solutions that are being shared in that summit. It's a solution-oriented summit, and I encourage everyone that can't attend in person to attend online and get some insight. Then we can spend time together building a more solid plan to bring you more confidence.
Phil, quick
Yes.
question for you before we jump off. I know we're up against our time. What'd you tip your robot at Bandanas?
Well, you know what, Burt, I gave the robot 5% because it didn't take the food off and put it on my table. But it was funny. You still get asked for a tip, and there was assistance from a live server, but the robot did much of the work.
Very
But
interesting.
that's a great question. So no, I gave the waitress 20%, even with the assistance of the robot. And I'm a good tipper when it comes to that.
Very nice.
All right. Thank you very much for joining. We'll see you next week, 7:30 Central Time. Bye-bye.
Tell your story, promote your products, communicate with your employees and customers vividly, dynamically, and powerfully. Whether it's a company video, recruitment video, online training, or live meeting, Feature Group can help you, from scripting to highly polished finished production. Whether it's live or on demand, we have the skills and equipment to wow your audience and drive your message home. Feature Group USA, the one-stop shop for all your broadcasting needs.